All right, so this mixing hack is something I like to do when I have multiple elements in a mixdown that I would like to sidechain compress, but I want to sidechain compress them to different extents. So for example, I might want some of the elements to pump really hard to my kick drum. Other elements I might want just a little bit of ducking, but not a really aggressive pumping. So what we can do is, of course, we could always take a compressor and just drag and drop it on each track independently. Maybe I want to put another one on my pad track, for example. And we can set up the sidechain input on the compressor and configure it accordingly on every different track independently. But something that I think is a little bit quicker and can be a little bit easier to kind of audition this stuff is to set up what I like to call sidechain buses. And I'll show you how to do that in just a minute here. Let's hear what we have. This is just a little 8-bar groove I put together containing a kick. We've got this top drum loop, bass sound, pad, and then these dub chords. And let's say, for example, I want to take this bass sound, I want to sidechain compress it to the kick, but I want it to just be a very light ducking of the bass notes whenever they're hitting at the same time as the kick. And let's say I want to take the pad and maybe the dub chords too, and I'd like to have a really heavy, aggressive sidechain compression pumping going on with those. So here's what we can do. What we can do is create a new audio track, so Command T or Control T, and let's rename this track SC for sidechain, and we'll call this one SC Light. And we're going to make another audio track, Command T or Control T, and we'll call this one SC for sidechain and Heavy. Okay, and notice that by default all of the outputs for all these tracks are set to the master out. But all we're going to do here is change those once we've configured our compressors on these two tracks. So let's start with the SC Light track. Sounds like a soda beverage or something like that, SC Light. So let's throw a compressor on that track. Let's configure the sidechain input to the kick drum. And we may go in and change these parameters a little bit later, but let's just get a basic setup here. Let's turn the threshold down a little bit, maybe down to -8, -9, somewhere in there. We can leave the ratio at 2:1. Let's go ahead and copy and paste this compressor onto the sidechain heavy track. And let's just make the settings a little bit more aggressive. So we're still getting the input from the kick drum here, but let's take the threshold all the way down. Maybe we'll bump the ratio all the way up so we get this really aggressive pumping effect coming from this one. So if I want to, as I mentioned earlier, if I want to take the bass and I want to do a little bit of a light sidechain compression, all we have to do is take the track's output, which again is going to the master by default. We'll set the output to the sidechain light track. Now the next thing we'll have to do is on the sidechain light track, we need to set the monitor option to in so that we can hear the bass passing through that track. So let's go to that track and see what's going on. You can see how the track is reading the input from the kick. And because the bass is passing through this track, we're getting a little bit of light sidechain compression happening. Solo that. Let's actually solo the track it's routed through. So obviously to go more aggressive, you can really hear that, but I just want a really light setting here, just a little bit of ducking. Maybe -12 dB or something we can set as the threshold. Perfect. Now let's take these other two elements, the pad and the dub chords. I want these to be sidechain compressed to a much greater extent. So what I'm going to do is hold Shift. We're going to select both of those tracks, and that's going to allow me to configure the output of both of them at the same time. So again, we'll set it so that they're not going out the master. They're going to go through the sidechain heavy track. And again, we'll need to configure our monitoring input, set it to in. And if we play those elements back, we can hear that very aggressive ducking coming through this track here, where we've got these really aggressive sidechain compression settings, a really low threshold, a really high ratio. And if we listen to the whole mix, let's unsolo this track, we can hear that little bit of ducking happening on the kick, on the bass as the kick is hitting, and then a way more aggressive sidechain compression ducking effect happening on these two elements, these pad and the dub chord elements here. And the cool thing about this is if I were to go in and add more parts to this track, I can kind of audition both. So even the bass, we can go here and just see, how does that sound on the sidechain heavy? Just switch the output. I feel like we lose too much of the bass. So let's switch it back to sidechain light. We get just that mild ducking, enough to get it out of the way of the kick, but not to lose it completely. And who knows, maybe the pad might sound a little bit better on Sidechain Lite. I kind of like it really aggressively ducking and pumping. It gives it a little bit more rhythm, a little bit more movement. So if you've got a track you've finished up and you're in the mixdown phase and you do want to apply some more pumping or some more sidechain compression to stuff, try this out. Try having a couple of different sidechain buses and audition your different sounds through the different sidechain buses, one with a much more aggressive sidechain compression, one with more of a lighter, more gentle sidechain compression, and see how it sounds. And you also have the added benefit here of being able to freeze your audio tracks or your MIDI tracks. Because you don't have a sidechain compressor directly on the track, you're routing its output through one of these sidechain buses, you can go ahead and freeze a track without any issue. So freeze track, bam, there we go. And it will still output to that sidechain compressor. Cool, so again, I hope this one has been helpful. Enjoy, happy mixing, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take care.